Hello and welcome everyone to another fireside chat. Today I have with me Dr. Anthony Che. He used to be a researcher, now he's a famous book author. I have his book right here. We'll talk about that book here in a little bit as well. And you have your own consulting company, right, that can help people with health and wellness related issues, some of which we're going to talk about today. But specifically for the purpose of this video, I'd like to talk to you about estrogenics and endocrine disrupting chemicals that I would argue most of you who are watching this are exposed to on a daily basis. And there are some potentially severe health consequences in the long run if you continue down that path. So I'd like to talk about, what are endocrine disrupting chemicals? What are xenoestrogens or estrogenics? Where would we find them in our environment? Be it skincare products, tap water, unfortunately, but many, many other things, plastic food storage containers, etc. I'm sure you'll cover many more categories as part of this interview. And then let's talk about some of the health consequences and what you can do to avoid that exposure, or at least significantly reduce it. You cannot completely avoid it. It's impossible unless you want to go live out in the sticks somewhere far away from modern civilization, but you can at least significantly reduce your exposure and thus reduce your risk of developing any of the diseases that come with long-term exposure. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Anthony. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, what you did in the past, what you do now, about your book, maybe your consulting company, and then we'll dive right into all of those topics.
Yeah, I did research for my PhD at Boston University Medical School on the topic of cholesterol and sex hormones. And while I was researching sex hormones, I realized there's chemicals, man-made chemicals, artificial, not found in nature, that act like estrogen in your body. They act on the estrogen receptor. Oftentimes they block the testosterone receptor also. So they confuse your body in terms of your sex hormone levels. So it lowers your testosterone, it lowers your free testosterone, it blocks binding the receptor, messes with your estrogen levels and your estrogen binding capacity and all kinds of different things related to sex hormones. And these chemicals, it's not just one thing. There was kind of this big push regarding BPA about 10 years ago, and people started to recognize BPA is bad for your health. Most people didn't talk about why it was bad for their health, but the scientific studies were very clear that it was bad. But the reason it's bad is it acts like estrogen. But it's not just BPA. That's the problem. It goes way beyond that one chemical, because there were scientists studying BPA and they were talking about how bad it was, but there were other scientists studying phthalates and talking about how bad those are. And those are other plastic chemicals. And then other scientists studying fragrance chemicals like parabens and some of these other chemicals, sunscreen chemicals, oxybenzone. And they were talking about how bad those are. And I started to piece it all together that all of those chemicals are acting in the same way in our body. They're acting like estrogen and causing a lot of bad health outcomes because of that activity. And again, our ancestors were never exposed to those.
Right. So you mentioned plastic a lot. Is that, in your opinion, like one of the main sources? Or are fragrances equally? I mean, where do you find fragrances? I mean, in a candle, I would assume, but there is probably significantly more sources out there, right?
It's everywhere nowadays. I mean, people put it on deodorant. There's fragrances in deodorant. So if you just get a random cheap deodorant off the shelf at Walmart, it's going to have estrogen chemicals in that product. Shampoo, conditioner, those things, people assume they're washing them off, but their hair still smells. The fragrances stay with you. Your skin absorbs those chemicals, and those estrogen chemicals that come with that get absorbed. They've even found issues with laundry detergent in scientific studies, looking at skin absorption from the fragrances in laundry detergent. So I'm even a fan of getting fragrance-free laundry detergent and not putting dryer sheets in there that smell real strong and things like that, because again, even if it's on your clothing, there's some skin absorption. It's not as much as if you're putting lotion on. If you have fragrance lotion and you're putting that on your arms or something, well, that's going into your skin a lot more than just clothing absorption. But it's all adding up, and that's the problem, is people are putting a little bit here, a little bit there, a lot here, a lot there, and it's just adding and adding and adding. And ultimately, as a society, we're wrecking our hormones. And it's becoming a major problem because for example, they did a study with rats and a chemical called atrazine. And atrazine is just like parabens and phthalates and BPA and oxybenzone in sunscreen. Atrazine, it's the second most used herbicide in North America. Very common. In Europe, by the way, it's totally illegal, but in America, it's very common. And with these rats, they had two groups of rats. One of the groups, well, first of all, they give them the exact same calories. One of the groups, they put low dose atrazine in their drinking water. And the scientists emphasized they used low dose because they wanted to imitate what humans are exposed to commonly in America. That group of rats got fat, and the other group of rats was totally normal, and they had the exact same calories. And that shows you how important it is to have good hormones, because if you're disrupting your hormones, even if you're eating the same calories as you were before or as somebody else, you're going to oftentimes gain a lot of extra weight. So just from a weight gaining perspective, it's a problem.
Right.
But then there's a whole list of other problems like depression and infertility. And I mean, there's a bunch of problems, right? So anytime you're disrupting your natural hormone levels and your hormone balance, you're going to see problems. And that's what you see with these chemicals.
Right. And, one of the things that you see very widespread is, low testosterone in men, right? Where obviously testosterone is important for men, but it's also important for women. It's not that, as a woman, it doesn't matter how much estrogen you have. It very much matters. But just looking at men and testosterone levels and how they've been declining over the decades, that's alarming. And the answer of, our healthcare system is to just lower the standard, what is considered normal, and right now, I think depending on, what standard you look at, it's like 250 or so or up is normal. 250 to 1100. I mean, alone that range tells you that nobody has a clue what is normal, but certainly, constantly declining levels can't be a good thing. Right. And so that's one clear example of where you can see, if you want to get tested and check your own levels, if you're, 30, 40, 50, and your levels are in the 200s, chances are you've low testosterone, or if you're close to the lower standard, you should be up in the 500 plus, I would assume, just based on historic data. Right. But, you mentioned now a couple of different, so you mentioned water, as in case of the study with rats, but when I read your book, it was one of the most eye-opening books I've read in recent history. And it was, I remember a couple of years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, when I told my wife, we're going to do paleo, or I'm going to do paleo starting tomorrow. And you're like, well, I'm the one cooking. So what do you mean you doing paleo? And then, that a couple of years later, well, it's not really paleo, keto is what we need to do, because it's, all those carbs are bad for us. And then, all the estrogenics, that was really the third super eye-opening event that we had, where I'm like, holy moly, everything we own in terms of skincare products, the water we drink, obviously, all of our food storage containers, a lot of our clothing, and anything in between, we have to throw away, and it was like so unbelievable that we are exposed to so many things, as you said, if it's one thing, maybe not a big deal, but if you add everything up, all the exposure levels that we have in our modern life, it's just ridiculous to how much of that stuff we're exposed to on a daily basis. And it's no wonder that it has significant health implications on so many levels, and birth control pill is another one. I mean, yes, on the one hand, you would argue, depending on what camp you fall in, that's one of the greatest inventions, because women suddenly, finally have the choice of how they want to, perceive or not. But by definition, birth control is an estrogenic. That's exactly what it's supposed to do with. And if you look at the potential side effects, if you ever look at the piece of paper that comes with it, it's just unbelievable what it can potentially, and in many cases does, to the female body, right? And add that in at a young age, plus everything else that you're doing. What are some of the things that you're seeing in terms of those diseases affecting younger and younger people? Like, I think I read in your book, puberty, starts getting, shifting down in age more and more and more, right? Yep. Exactly. And that's also likely because of hormonal changes that you could argue are coming from our environment.
Exactly. They're trying to normalize 9-year-old girls going into puberty. They're trying to make that a normal thing, because it used to not be normal at all, but now it's so common that there's medical journals publishing research saying, well, let's just call that normal. Let's just make that the normal range, just like they did with testosterone, like you said. I mean, they've lowered the normal range for testosterone multiple different times to accommodate so many people. with low testosterone, but that's not a good thing. But yeah, breast cancer is up 250% since 1980. And a lot of these health issues, depression continues to rise. There's multiple factors there, but just take depression, for instance. If you have like children, if children have higher BPA in their urine, you find higher rates of depression, substantially higher rates. So, and children shouldn't even have depression. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy that you find kids with depression. So there's a lot of really good indicators, and it's hard to do studies because so many people are saturated with these chemicals, right? When you look at soy, for example, and you give people soy and you say, oh, look, it doesn't cause any problems. Well, it's because so many people already have the problems to begin with.
Right.
You're not really like adding much more to the mix when you just throw in soy. But if you get rid of all these chemicals and then you throw soy in there, you would see a lot of the problems. And so sometimes in studies you see problems, sometimes you don't with some of these chemicals, including soy. And that mixed result confuses a lot of people. It gets people arguing about this stuff. But once you recognize just how pervasive these chemicals are and how many of them there are and how many people are exposed to them, and then you start thinking about the research in that light and recognizing, yeah, let's just look at this one chemical and let's clear out all the other ones. And then it starts to become really obvious what's happening. Because if you take soy and you take plastic chemicals and you take birth control and you take red food coloring and all these chemicals, the ones that act like estrogen, and you start looking at the health problems that arise from these chemicals, they're all the same. Like they all have the same, right. They're all connected. It's like, oh, breast cancer. Oh yeah, sure enough. Like this one's connected to breast cancer. This one's connected to breast cancer. This one's connected. Depression. Oh yeah, sure enough. And you go down the list. And again, you have to learn how to like understand the research, because if you just pick out one study, oftentimes there's financial influence by these companies that want to sell birth control, or they want to sell soy-based processed foods because they make a ton of money on that stuff. And so certain items you have to be really careful with in terms of the research, because there's a lot of money involved. And people have seen this with COVID, hopefully. I mean, that's a good example of a situation where a lot of people have waken up to the fact that there's a lot of financial influence and a lot of problems with having money in politics, right. And just censorship and all this stuff going on. But once you get past that, it's very obvious, I think. In terms of if you were to rank the potential sources of exposure, how would that look like? What is the lowest hanging fruit? What is the stuff that you should, maybe let's just list them first, and then we talk about potential alternatives and replacements and how you can, mitigate your risk. But you mentioned, drinking water being one source. So the obvious option would be to filter your drinking water. And I think you said in your book, a simple charcoal filter is enough to filter out most of those chemicals. So you don't have to go fancy with anything. Just, charcoal filter is enough. Plastic food storage containers is another one. And there is some debate, or at least there used to be, that, it's only if you heat those, then they are problematic. But I think there are studies that show that even at room temperature, in particular in combination with liquids or maybe acidic food or, salty food or fatty food, that transfer of those chemicals from the plastic into the food can also happen at room temperature. So it doesn't necessarily have to be heated in your microwave, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. Yeah, correct. Right. Yeah. And the obvious choice for that would be plastic. Or what is a safe? Glass. Plastic. Glass. Stainless steel, I assume, would be fine too, right? Correct. What about silicone? Silicone's good. Yeah. Sometimes they make it weird colors, and you wonder about the dye they're putting in the silicone. But right. The actual silicone itself is good. I've looked very carefully at the research, and it looks good. It's definitely not estrogenic. Sometimes these non-stick coatings and things are problematic for cancer causing studies and things, but they're not estrogenic, but they have some problems. So certain chemicals, are still bad in themselves, but they're not as bad as some of these hormone disruptors, or it's debatable. Right. But yeah, the actual silicone is fine. So that's a good point. A lot of people ask me about that. And of course, the personal care products are another really low hanging fruit, because I mean, so many people use so many personal care products. I see people rubbing these things all over their faces, and sometimes they've done animal studies with parabens, for example, and they find that it shortens lifespan. It shortens the telomeres and things. And parabens are used as preservatives in a lot of these face creams that women use. And so they're trying to look younger, or they're just trying to use makeup, and there's actually aging their skin faster in the long term. So literally the opposite of what they want. And it's sad because most people don't realize that.
The thing is with certain, I mean, with lotions and stuff, something that's, maybe has beef tallow or, the natural kind of fat, is probably fine as long as it's not having fragrance and stuff. With deodorant, I've noticed that most of the natural products that don't have any of those chemicals, they leave stains on the clothing. Especially, I notice on all my workout shirts, they almost all have like dark spots that you can't get out anymore because of, I don't know if it's the fat or something in those products. So I've actually switched to either not using anything at all. And funny enough, whether or not I have any odor depends on what I eat. If I have a clean diet, I don't smell, I don't need anything. If I have a glass of wine or maybe two, or maybe something that I shouldn't be eating anyway, I can tell the likelihood of me smelling under my armpits is significantly higher than if I don't. So that's also maybe tells you a little bit about, hey, if you smell very badly, maybe there is something in your diet that, you'd have to change. So you don't need.
That's correct. Well, not to mention too, when you first get off of these really strong, harsh deodorants with aluminum and chemicals and all this, your body reacts there is a period for about a week where you smell a lot more, just getting some of the stuff out of your system. And then after that, your body says, oh, I see, you're not using deodorant, you're not suppressing your sweat glands and whatnot. And then it just goes back to normal. So there's a lot of stuff that builds up after a while that you get rid of for about a week. And you have to kind of get past that first week, and then things get a lot better.
Speaking of, all of that stuff building up maybe in your, fat cells or whatever, how long does it take for, to clean everything out? I mean, I know obviously the body has natural detoxification processes. I don't think you need to be drinking green juices. You're probably going to make stuff worse if you do. But how long does it take to get rid of all of those toxins that might be built up in your body?
Yeah, it can take up to about a year and a half. The average lifespan of a fat cell is a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
So it takes a while, but you get a lot of benefits just within the first 6 weeks. Once you cut out these estrogens, I've seen people double their testosterone in 6 weeks. It happens all the time, actually. So I know it's having a very quick impact, but just for the sake of like really getting your body cleaned out, it's probably a good year and a half. And saunas help. If you want to cut that in half, use the sauna regularly. Sweat a lot. Sweating helps.
Right. So exercise, sauna, all of those things that make you sweat.
Yep.
Cool. And is there a chance of maybe experiencing some side effects as your body detoxes or releases those chemicals from your fat cells? Because while they are stored, they might not be super problematic, right? But as they are getting released, is there a potential of noticing negative side effects?
Sometimes, but not usually. Usually if you just, like, for example, if you use the sauna, shower right away afterwards, especially when you're first detoxing from some of this stuff, get the chemicals off your skin so they don't reabsorb. But beyond that, the nice thing about these estrogen chemicals is your body doesn't perceive them as toxins. Your body thinks it's just estrogen. Right. So your body doesn't respond with migraines or all kinds of weird issues like you would with heavy metals or something. So usually you don't have that much of a health impact that's really obvious. It's usually more just hormones and slow fat gains and breast cancer after 10 years and depression after a lot of exposure. So a lot of the stuff, the timeline is a lot longer. And that makes it harder to see in a scientific study. So like, for example, sometimes they do these ridiculous studies with soy where they have like two groups of people, and one group, they give them a bunch of soy, and the other group, they don't give them soy. And they say, oh, look, it doesn't. And they do it for 6 weeks. And then they say, oh, look, it doesn't really do anything. And it's like, well, number one, those people are drinking out of plastic water bottles the whole time. Everybody is, and they're putting all these fragrances on and on and on. They've got red food coloring up, up to the tops of like their Gatorade bottles and all this other stuff. And So of course you're not going to see much difference, if any, and sometimes even there you see differences. That's the sad thing. But the studies are so silly the way they design them that oftentimes it's almost like the study is designed to fail. They do this with Alzheimer's too. That's it's really crazy when they do it with Alzheimer's. They'll give people like fish oil for 6 weeks after they get Alzheimer's and say, look, it doesn't work. It's like, well, number one, you waited until somebody got Alzheimer's. Number two, you only did something for 6 weeks.
Right.
And that Alzheimer's probably took 20 years for them to really develop,
Right.
So it's a problem in our research. And that's one of the reasons we haven't cured Alzheimer's, is because people are so short-sighted and their timelines are so short. And they're all looking for these fake ways around just eating healthy. Just eat healthy. Like everybody wants the quicker way to get about it. So, I think it's a combination of things, and it takes a little while.
So if we look at diet, sleep, stress management, reconnecting with nature, exercise, exposure to xenoestrogens, what kind of ranking would you see? How important are the xenoestrogens in comparison to, making bad food choices, let's say? Is that something where, you got to take care of all of those areas, or would I get more benefit by doing X versus Y if I only have so much, I don't know, mental bandwidth or motivation or financial means to implement changes right away?
Yeah. It depends on the genetics, right? Because some people they're very sensitive to these estrogens. And so it's a much higher priority for those people. Like they have all these breast cancer genes, or they have all these low testosterone genes. And that's one of the things I analyze with my company, my consulting company. But so a lot of it is genetic variation between different people and who's more at risk. And then another aspect is how much are you exercising and how young are you, right? Because when you're younger, you have a higher metabolism.
Right.
And when you're exercising more, you have a higher metabolism. And when you're eating healthier, you have a higher metabolism. So you can actually get away with a little bit more. I'm not saying you should, but you can if you're exercising, eating healthy, sleeping better. So that allows you to get away with that a little bit more in terms of everything, right? Because nobody's going to have the perfect diet. It's never going to be 100% perfect. Right. Nobody's going to have 100% zero exposure to these chemicals in our lives. It's just too hard. So you have to exercise, you have to eat healthy, you know what I mean? You have to sleep well, because that way your body can resist some of the problems from these chemicals.
How realistic is it if someone who has never heard about xenoestrogens before, they now see this video, maybe pick up your book, and read about that. How realistic is it to make all of the necessary changes? And I'm saying this in the context that, for us, we put a relatively high priority on healthy living and on our personal care and everything. And so we made pretty dramatic changes in terms of just replacing all of our food storage containers, replacing all of our personal care products, just doing everything almost in one shot. And I can tell you it was ridiculously expensive, as I'm sure you know. Most people are not in a position to be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
How would you recommend they approach the topic? Or at some point, I guess you have to be okay with what you can do. There is only so much you can do, and stressing out about all the things that you can't do is probably gonna be even worse to your health than not doing that. So what is your recommendation if someone sees and says, okay, I want to make changes, but my budget is limited and my knowledge is limited? Where can I start? To make a significant or a meaningful impact?
Right. Well, for sure, filter your drinking water, because, everybody should be doing that anyways. And it surprises me how many people don't do that. They're just drinking straight out of the faucet, which is crazy. And there's really cheap filters. It's not that expensive. Activated charcoal that they use in those filters is pretty cheap. So sure enough, the filter units can be cheap. Some of them are expensive, but you can start with a cheap one. Make sure you filter your drinking water. And then the other thing is, as you use up your personal care products, get good ones, replace them with good ones. You can find good ones that are inexpensive. They don't have to be super expensive, super high quality, especially if they're fragrance free. If you're wondering and you're not sure, just go fragrance free, And on my website, ajconsultingcompany.com, I have a whole list of like, here's the shampoo that I like, here's the deodorant that I like, and all this kind of thing. And that sometimes helps people. It's not exhaustive. It's not like a list of everything under the sun that's super good, but it's a good start for people to think through some of this stuff. Again, as you replace your personal care items, you'll realize it's not really extra money because you got to buy those anyway.
Right.
And then the Tupperware, I think people should just replace it like you did, just get rid of it, get the glass stuff. It's worth it. It's a long-term investment because that stuff lasts just about forever, unless you're dropping and smashing it.
Right.
The glass lasts a lot longer than the plastic. The stainless steel water bottle lasts a lot longer than the plastic, obviously. So some of this stuff is a bit of a long-term investment, and people should do what they can for that. But in the meantime, replace stuff as you go along.
Right. And I guess I'll give you one example where I tend to be super extreme. Like, when we replaced our plastic workup bottles, we went with stainless steel, obviously. But then the lid, we were looking for silicone. And there are not that many options out there that are completely plastic free. And then in retrospect, I was thinking, you know what, even if the lid has plastic, it's not in constant contact with the water, right? Just because I might drink through it, or I might unscrew it and then drink out of the stainless steel bottle. That's still okay. You don't have to go overboard and try to make it perfect, because it's probably going to cost you more. It's going to take you much more time, and it's going to frustrate you very likely. Instead of just going with something that's significantly better than what you had before, right? So that's something you would recommend?
Oh, yeah. 100% agree. Yeah, it's almost like the debate about grass-fed meat versus regular meat. It's like, well, if you can't afford grass-fed, get regular meat. It's better than going with junk food and eating at McDonald's, eating a bunch of processed garbage. Do what you can, and there are grades and there are levels, but it's important, to do what you can, because a lot of people aren't doing anything at all for their health. And then what they end up, that's why the average American senior is on like 11 prescription drugs. Like everybody seems to be on a big pile of prescription drugs, and it's costing thousands of dollars a month.
Right.
And you don't want to be that person either, because you saved a bunch of money and now you're 40 years old and now you're paying a bunch of money and your health is lousy. So you don't have any energy and you can't have an enjoyable life, So it's an investment. A lot of the same people that say they can't afford, a silicone spatula or whatever, they're driving a super expensive car. There's oftentimes, not everybody, all right, but there's oftentimes priorities that get misplaced, and people need to pay attention to that too. But it's always variable. A lot of differences in everybody's unique situation.
And I think you have different, I'm not sure how you call it, but different plans, right, in your book, where the gold plan, the silver, and the bronze, depending on maybe your genetics, right? If you want to get tested, people can talk to you to find out maybe what they are more likely to respond to in terms of certain environmental factors. And based on your health situation, if you're already in very bad shape, maybe you want to go with a little bit stricter plan. And if you're already in pretty good shape overall, no chronic conditions, maybe young, there might not be a need to go completely overboard. Maybe stick with something that you can sustain. Yeah. And that's also one thing that I've seen, and it doesn't really matter if it's nutrition or exercise, whatever, do what you can continue doing for the rest of your life. It doesn't really make sense to do something for 30 days and then be so sick of it that, you don't want to continue and go back to your old habits.
Exactly. Yeah. Sustainability is a huge important component of health optimization. Have to be able to sustain it.
What have you worked with? I don't know if you work with clients or other people, like want to call them patients, or people that in your environment that have made changes and have seen an impact, a positive impact on their life in terms of, you mentioned before, higher testosterone levels. But is there anything else that you have seen that is worth mentioning, or that might be motivating for some that, I don't know, maybe have been diagnosed with breast cancer, or have a family history of breast cancer, where you say, hey, people who've been doing this have seen the following results, so that might be encouraging for you to follow in those footsteps.
Oh yeah, I have people weight loss is a big one, right? Like I have people constantly telling me that they lost 40 pounds or they lost this or they lost that. And part of that's because I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting. And I tell people, all their genetics, from their diet to their sleep, to their brain performance, to how they should be working out in the gym. So when I do consulting, it's not just one thing, but it's very holistic. But the estrogens are a component of that. And weight loss is a huge component in balancing your hormones, right? Like a lot of times bodybuilders will tell you this too. Of course, they overdose hormones. A lot of bodybuilders inject all these hormones, and sure enough, they get super lean when they do that. And you don't have to overdose the hormones to see the same type of an impact. You don't see it as extreme. You're not going to get like 300 pounds of muscle and be super lean without hormones, but you can definitely get leaner and go in the right direction. That's one thing I see oftentimes. Another thing is I've had a lot of people become fertile. They had a lot of fertility struggles, a lot of money spent. Some people are spending like $100,000 on fertility treatments, like crazy money. And they get rid of these estrogen chemicals and they start having kids for free, basically, and they get lost with Tupperware or whatever else. But the amount of money people are spending, for these artificial treatments to cover up artificial chemicals that they're being exposed to is sad, because a lot of them don't realize it. So that's one I see.
That's one interesting thing, because ever since, I guess we've been paying more attention to, but our son was born prematurely 6 years ago. That was before we knew anything about anything that we do right now in terms of health, fitness. Xenoestrogens, obviously, didn't even know the word at the time. But since then, we've been paying more attention to how people have babies around you, and some of the complications and issues, be it infertility, be it premature birth, etc. And since we've been paying attention, we've noticed that almost everyone who we know who told us that, hey, they are pregnant, or they had a baby, there were complications in every single case. And I'm like, how is that possible that most people that we know cannot have a healthy pregnancy without either a premature birth, us included, or a baby that unfortunately didn't make it, or people trying to become pregnant and not make it in years. I mean, how is that possible? It should be such a natural kind of thing to get pregnant and have a healthy baby, right? I mean, obviously, I know that back in the days, our ancestors, there was a lot of childhood mortality as well, probably for a lot of other reasons than xenoestrogens and some of those man-made issues that we have been introducing. But it's mind-boggling, how much goes wrong these days with trying to have a baby. And hormones obviously play an important role in all of that, I believe.
100%, yeah. Yeah, and in postpartum depression also, after the baby, a lot of women go into depression because their hormones are all messed up. I mean, because the estrogen drops way off after pregnancy. And and if you've got all these fake estrogens miscommunicating with your brain, then that's a higher risk and a higher probability. It's a bigger problem. So it's pretty pervasive, it's from the pregnancy all the way past the pregnancy. And then the kids, I mean, think about what babies are eating these days. It's completely insane. A lot of the mothers are eating junk food, but then the babies, because they say, well, I'm breastfeeding, so I can eat whatever I want, and that's ridiculous. But then parents are giving their kids applesauce and parade peaches and parade pears and like literally just pure carbs, oatmeal. It's not even protein. It's just pure sugar, pure carbs. They wonder why the kids are so addicted to carbs everywhere, and it's like, we're starting them off with baby food, and sure, it's in a glass jar, but I mean, come on, it's all carbs.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, those pouches, I wouldn't be sure about, the lining on the inside. I mean, yes, it looks like an aluminum or whatever pouch, or I don't know what it's made out of, but the lining inside to keep the food fresh, what is it made out of? And the same goes for cans, right? Like sparkling water or whatever. The other day I reached out to San Pellegrino and asked them, what is your lining made out of? Is it BPA or BPS or something else? And they're like, well, it's proprietary. We can't tell.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so thank you. I'm not going to buy that stuff anymore, because if you don't know what's in there, chances are it's probably not good for you.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a secret because everybody's using it. It's not like they're making money on their special can design.
Right.
It's it's a regular soda can. It's a regular aluminum can. So it shouldn't be a proprietary thing. It shouldn't have to be secret. The only reason it's secret, as you know as well as I do, it's because they're using BPS or BPF or BPF or some version of BPA that's just as bad for you.
Right.
That's a good point. A lot of people are doing these calorie-free soda drinks like LaCroix and whatever else, and they're not in glass jars. They're in soda cans. They're in aluminum cans, and I'm not a fan. Yes, it's cheaper, than glass. So a lot of companies have moved in that direction, especially in the last few years. But you just, it's not worth it. Just drink water if you need to. If you really want sparkling water, I love sparkling water. I have one of those drink mates. I put CO2. I pump the CO2 in myself. I put essential oil in there myself. Oh yeah. Because I like it. I keep cold water in the fridge in a glass jar, and then I pour it in there, put CO2 in there, hit it with some tangerine essential oil, put a little stevia in there, and that's it. Just flavored just enough, tiny bit. The essential oil gives it a good punch, and then the bubbles are fun, and it's cold.
That's right. Right. Cool. All right. Well, there was a lot to unpack. Again, when we learned about all of that, I'm like, holy moly, this is like, how did we not know about this? And fortunately, we do not know, and we have made a lot of changes. And I encourage everyone to, pick up, a copy of your book. It's eye-opening, really. I've learned so much, and then also your webpage and all the products that you recommend. We've started buying based on that list as well. Where else can people find you? I think what is your webpage? AJ
Consulting Company. .com. So I've got ajconsultingcompany.com, and then I've also got Instagram and YouTube. I do some stuff on both of those, mostly YouTube.
Okay.
If I'm on there, which I'm not very consistent, but if I am, those are the three places.
Okay. And in terms of if someone wants to get like one of those genetic, tests done, what does it involve? Do you send out the kits to collect?
You just do the 23andMe. Yeah, you do like 23andMe or Ancestry and spit in the tube and go through that whole thing. And then you just go to my website and sign up. It's pretty simple. I usually run sales. So I have like sale prices that I try and run so that it's pretty affordable for people. And yeah, I just sit down with people and usually Zoom or Skype and go through all the different genetic issues that they have and their history and their medications and their supplements and on and on and on. It's very intensive. It's simple. I make it easy to understand, but it's thorough.
Right. So the genetic testing is done by one of those companies, and then you just interpret the results and help people make sense of. Okay, gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Easy enough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I think we can wrap it up. I very much appreciate your time. It was very informative. A lot of good information. I'm going to link the book and your webpage and your Instagram with that. Thank you again. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Michael.
We'll wrap it up.
Yeah, thanks.